The courtroom was packed, cameras ready, and in the back row a frail Vietnamese man sat trembling, moments away from being deported. His only defender, a quiet veteran Marine in a faded uniform who hadn't spoken in years. When the judge mocked his war record, the old Marine stood up. And what happened next shut down the entire courtroom. They thought he was too old, too broken. But they didn't know who he really was, or what he had buried, until now. Drop a comment. Would you have stood up? Share this with someone who still believes in brotherhood and justice. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's story will shake you even harder. This is Veteran Biker, where the forgotten rise and the world remembers. The gavel slammed down with finality, echoing through the courtroom like a shot. Motion to deport approved. Case closed. Judge Halverson didn't even look up as he signed the order. Across from him, Minh Tran, 78, hunched from age and war, clutched a worn manila envelope to his chest. His voice had cracked minutes earlier, trying to explain in broken English that he had worked with U.S. troops during the Vietnam War, that he had papers, that this was his home. But the judge didn't care. These people always think they're owed something, Halverson had muttered, not even bothering to whisper. A hush fell over the room. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Did he just say that out loud?" The ICE officers at the back didn't flinch. Cameras stayed still. The bailiff looked down at his shoes. No one moved. Then, just before Minh was let out, a sound broke the stillness. Slow, measured, like thunder from beneath the floorboards. It was the sound of someone standing up. "I was there!" a voice called from the last row. All heads turned. An old man stood tall and unflinching, in a faded Marine Corps jacket. His silver hair cropped close, a row of service ribbons gleamed faintly in the dim light. "I saw what he did," the man said. "I watched him pull American soldiers out of the jungle one by one, while enemy mortars rained down on us, including a lieutenant named Halvorsen." The judge's pen froze, and in that moment, brief but eternal, the entire courtroom stood still. Minh Tran's mornings followed a sacred routine. Up before the sun, a pot of jasmine tea set to steep while he swept the tiny walkway in front of his one-bedroom home in Westminster. The air always smelled faintly of night-blooming flowers, car exhaust, and something else he couldn't name. Freedom, perhaps. Even after 39 years in America, he still paused each time the flag across the street rustled, just to look, just to remember. He lived simply, alone, since Lan passed away 7 years ago. Their son, David, visited once a week, but worked full-time in San Diego. Minh never asked for much, just the garden, his memories, and the chessboard he brought every Friday to the park by Bolsa Avenue. It was there he met the tall, quiet man who always sat alone on the stone bench. He never spoke much at first, just nodded as Minh approached, then gestured toward the board with a silent challenge. Minh liked the way he played, disciplined, precise, always protecting his pawns. Eventually, Minh learned the man's name, Ray Carter, a Marine, retired, said little, carried something heavy behind his eyes. Sometimes, after a game ended, Minh would point at one of Ray's moves and smile. "You think like soldier," he said one afternoon, tapping a knight. Ray raised an eyebrow. "So do you." Minh chuckled. "No, I just carry bandage. You carry rifle." They didn't talk about the war much. But when Minh rolled up his sleeve one time to reveal a faded scar, shrapnel from 1969, Ray stared for a long moment, then simply said, "Hugh?" Minh nodded. From that day, their silences grew more comfortable. Minh never spoke of the nightmares that still came sometimes, of fire, of screaming boys, of helicopters leaving without him. But somehow, playing chess with Ray, the weight grew lighter. He didn't know then that a letter would arrive the following week, one that would threaten everything. The envelope arrived on a Monday, tucked between a stack of supermarket flyers and a utility bill. Min recognized the government seal immediately. His hands hesitated as he opened it, slow, cautious. The English was hard to follow, but one phrase stood out, printed in bold, notice to appear: Immigration Court. He stared at the letter for a long time, the steam from his tea curling upward untouched. The official language swam in his mind: status discrepancy, unverified naturalization, pending deportation review. Min reread the date, 3 weeks from now. He folded the paper neatly and slid it beneath the old tin box where he kept Lan's photo, a dried lotus blossom, and the receipt from their first apartment. When David visited that weekend, Min didn't mention the letter. What would he say? That a clerical error from decades ago might erase everything he built? That after all these years, paying taxes, working quietly, living humbly, he still wasn't safe? Instead, Min offered him a cup of tea, asked about work, and walked him out to the car with a bag of fresh mangoes. The next Friday at the park, Min hesitated before setting up the board. Ray was already seated, arms folded, his eyes scanning the horizon like he was watching for something. Midway through the game, Min finally asked, voice low, "What happen if government say you don't belong?" Ray's eyes met his. "They tried that with my cousin," he said. "Born here, still spent 6 months in detention because someone got his paperwork wrong." Min said nothing, just nodded, as if that confirmed what he already feared. Ray looked at him for a long moment. Something going on? Min opened his mouth, closed it, then shook his head gently. Just dream. Bad dream. Ray didn't push, but the rest of the game passed in silence. The following morning, Min noticed a white SUV idling across the street. 2 men in collared shirts sat inside, one holding a clipboard. They didn't knock, they didn't get out, but they didn't leave either. The knock came before dawn. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 3 more. Min sat up in bed, heart pounding, as if some old reflex from the jungle had snapped him awake. The house was still dark, but headlights flared through the front window. He shuffled to the door in his slippers, squinting through the peephole. 2 men in blue windbreakers with DHS stitched over the breasts. Another in a dark vest that read ICE. He opened the door slowly. "Mr. Tran Min?" one asked, already pulling papers from a folder. "We have an order for immediate custody pending immigration review." Min blinked. "I know, understand. I live here long time." The agent's voice was flat. "You failed to respond to an appearance order. You're being taken to a holding facility pending your court date." I not miss. I read. I come," Min protested. The agent stepped inside anyway. Within minutes, Min was in the back of the SUV, clutching nothing but the slippers on his feet and the envelope they let him grab from the counter. The tin box stayed behind. At the Federal Holding Center, Min was processed like any other detainee, fingerprinted, strip-searched, placed in a room with 6 other men, some younger, some silent, some clearly broken by the system already. A woman in a grey suit came to see him later that afternoon. "Court appointed. I'll represent you," she said. "We don't have much time. Your court date's been expedited. You're being reviewed under fast-track removal." Min nodded slowly, unsure what most of that meant. "We'll try to argue on humanitarian grounds," she continued. "You're elderly. You've been here decades. But unless we can find proof of legal status or refugee eligibility—" "I help Marines," Min interrupted. "Long time ago. I save many." The woman looked up. "Do you have anything? Documents? Letters? Witnesses?" Min shook his head. "Paper gone. But man, he know me. We play chess." She smiled faintly. "That's not quite how the court works." Min looked down, folding his hands in his lap. Outside the small window, daylight was fading. Somewhere in the park, Ray Carter would be waiting at the chessboard, but this Friday, Min wouldn't show. 3 days later, Min Tran shuffled into the courtroom, his wrists bound loosely with plastic restraints. He wore a government-issued blue jumpsuit. His slippers were gone. He scanned the benches. No family, no familiar faces, until, near the back, he saw him. Ray Carter sat motionless, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on Min like he was standing at attention. The courtroom was sparse: a judge, a translator, an ICE attorney, and Min's court-appointed lawyer. No press, no jury, no time. Judge Halverson reviewed the file with disinterest. Subject entered under refugee classification in 1980. No follow-up documentation, no naturalization certificate located, no record of permanent status. Min's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has lived here nearly 40 years. He assisted U.S. troops during the Vietnam conflict. He has severe medical conditions, and this is the only country he has family in. Halverson didn't look up. Any proof? No direct documents, she admitted. But we can present character witnesses. We're not here for character, Halverson cut in. This is an expedited case under national security directives. Presence without valid legal standing is sufficient for removal. He turned to Min. Do you wish to say anything? Min stood slowly. The microphone wobbled as he leaned in. I fight for America, he said softly, not with gun, with hands, with blood. I fix soldier. I save one named Halvorsen. The room stilled. The judge looked up, visibly annoyed. That's not relevant to this hearing. From the back row, Ray Carter stood. Objection, he said, voice firm, heads turned. Who are you? The judge asked, eyes narrowing. Ray stepped forward, hands at his sides. Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Carter, United States Marine Corps, retired. Halverson raised an eyebrow. You are not counsel. Sit down. Ray didn't move. I was there, Your Honor. I saw Mr. Tran carry wounded Marines out of fire zones while mortars rained down. He saved lives that day, including a young lieutenant whose name was Halverson. Silence. Halverson's lips tightened. We are not here to relitigate the war, he said coldly. This is immigration court, not a battlefield. But, sir, Ray said quietly, that war never ended for him. Min turned to look at him. For the first time in days, his eyes held something more than fear. They held memory. They held hope. The next morning, the hearing resumed. Ray returned in full dress uniform this time. Pressed jacket, polished medals, campaign ribbons lined like silent testimonies across his chest. He walked with a limp, slow but deliberate, each step echoing across the sterile courtroom floor. Min watched him enter, eyes wide. His lawyer leaned over and whispered, "That your friend?" Ray nodded slightly to Min but said nothing until called. Your Honor, the lawyer began, we'd like to formally request Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Carter be recognized as a witness. Halverson frowned. He is not on the pre-approved witness list. We are requesting special consideration due to the unique nature of his testimony. The judge sighed but gestured. Proceed, briefly. Ray approached the stand and was sworn in. His voice, though gravelly with age, was steady. I served in Quang Tri province in 1969, he said. We were ambushed outside a fire base. The medics couldn't reach us. Min Tran, known to us as Doc Min, ran through enemy fire 3 times to get our wounded. He didn't carry a weapon, just a med kit and a prayer. The courtroom was quiet. I owe him my life, Ray continued. Many of us do. Halverson barely blinked. Do you have any written confirmation of this alleged service? Ray's brow furrowed. It was covert, off-book, civilian aid. Then you have no official record? No, sir. But I have scars, and I have 12 men still alive because of him, some of whom... The judge raised a hand. Thank you, Mr. Carter. That's enough. The ICE attorney stood. Objection to relevance. The witness's testimony is anecdotal, unverifiable, and not material to immigration status. Halverson nodded, sustained. Ray turned slightly in disbelief. He bled for this country. That's not a legal defense, the judge replied. Ray's voice rose slightly. "You can't erase someone's life because of missing paperwork. He did more for America than most citizens ever will." The judge glared. "You will not lecture this court, Sergeant." Ray fell silent, his hands clenched at his sides. Then Halverson added coldly, "And frankly, your emotional investment compromises your credibility. You're retired, elderly, sentimental. That is not evidence." Ray didn't sit back down. He remained standing, his jaw tight, his fists still clenched at his sides as if trying to hold together what little dignity the room hadn't already torn apart. Min turned toward him slightly in his seat. His hands trembled in his lap. Halverson looked back to the court clerk. "Let the record show that the witnesses' statements have no bearing on the legal grounds for this hearing. We are proceeding with removal unless new statutory evidence is submitted within 24 hours. Min's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, please, we request an extension to gather testimony from other veterans, potentially secure character letters from the Department of Defense." "No," Halverson interrupted. "This is a streamlined case. Due process has been observed. We're not opening a circus." She persisted. "He's a decorated community figure. There's precedent for deferred action based on humanitarian factors. I decide what's relevant here," the judge snapped. Then, turning to Min, Halverson added, "You will be remanded back to custody. If no legal documentation emerges by tomorrow, your deportation will proceed." Min nodded slowly, too exhausted to speak. Ray stepped forward again. "This is a disgrace." Two bailiffs began to move. Halverson looked up sharply. "Remove that man from the court." Ray turned to Min. "I won't let them do this." One of the bailiffs reached for Ray's shoulder. "I walked across a minefield to bring this man out alive," Ray growled, "and now I'm being thrown out because I'm not on a list?" The courtroom froze again. Even the stenographer had stopped typing, but Halverson didn't flinch. "Escort him out." Ray didn't resist. As they led him out, he looked back one last time at Min and gave a small nod, like a promise unspoken. Min held his gaze as long as he could, until the doors shut behind Ray and left him in that cold courtroom alone. Ray stood outside the Veterans Affairs building, his dress uniform replaced by a plain brown jacket and a folder clutched tightly in one hand. Inside were affidavits he'd managed to gather. Old Marines who remembered Min, one even faxing a photo of them beside a scorched medevac chopper. It wasn't official military paperwork, but it was something. The receptionist didn't look up when he stepped in. "Appointments only. I'm here for Commander Hale," Ray said. "He owes me 5 minutes." She hesitated. "And your name?" "Gunnery Sergeant Raymond Carter, retired." She made a quick call, then whispered something inaudible. After a long pause, she looked up with a practiced smile. "He's unavailable today." Ray's eyes narrowed. "He's in the building. His car's parked outside." "I'm sorry, sir." The smile stayed, but the temperature dropped. Ray left the folder on the desk. "Tell him it's about Min Tran. He'll know." As he stepped back into the sunlight, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Maya, the young local reporter who'd first covered Min's chess games as a human interest piece. "Protests at ICE Center tonight. Vietnamese community showing up big. I'll be there. Cameras too." Ray replied simply, "I'll come. He's not alone in this." That evening, outside the downtown detention facility, nearly 100 people gathered with candles and signs written in Vietnamese and English. "Honor our allies. Min Tran saved American lives. Freedom has no expiration date." Some carried faded photos of loved ones who'd served in the war. Others brought newspaper clippings of refugee arrivals in 1975, families on boats holding children wrapped in American flags. Maya stood near the front with a camera crew. Ray found her and nodded. But not 10 minutes into the vigil, the sound of sirens cut through the night. 3 black vans rolled in. Officers in riot gear fanned out. "No permit," one barked into a loudspeaker. Disperse immediately. They're not blocking traffic, Maya argued. They're praying. Tear gas hissed behind them. Elderly women stumbled, a teenager screamed, flags dropped to the pavement as people ran in confusion. Ray grabbed Maya by the arm and pulled her behind a barricade. His eyes burned, not from the gas but from the fury welling behind them. This was supposed to be America. Min had risked everything for that idea, and now they were treating him like he didn't belong. Like none of them ever did. Ray sat across from Maya at the back of a diner, his hands still trembling slightly from the protest. The scent of burnt tear gas still clung to his jacket. She had pulled up her laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. "You okay?" she asked without looking up. "I've had worse," he muttered, sipping cold coffee. "But this ain't the country we bled for." Maya turned the screen toward him. "No national outlets are picking it up. Local paper buried it under traffic news. LAPD gave a statement calling it a peaceful dispersal." Ray laughed bitterly. "They're gaslighting the entire neighborhood." She nodded. "But I've got footage. Clear shots of officers pushing down elders, spraying kids. I'll publish it. Let's see who ignores that." Ray leaned back, eyes distant. "I called 5 different vet groups today. Nobody returned my message." One guy from the American Legion said, and I quote, "We're not in the business of defending foreigners." Maya's eyes widened. "You're kidding, I wish I was." Outside, the sky was overcast, a storm threatened. Maya closed the laptop. "They're closing ranks." "They always do," Ray said. "It's what cowards do when they know they're wrong." There was a pause before she asked, "What about the Pentagon? Anyone there still owe you a favor?" Ray pulled out a worn business card from his wallet. The name read, "Colonel Benjamin Strickland, DOD Liaison for Veteran Affairs. I trained him, saved his ass in Kandahar." Ray looked at the card. "He's a good man, or used to be." He dialed the number. Voicemail. "Ben, it's Ray. I need 5 minutes. It's about a man named Min Tran. You'd be dead if we didn't have guys like him in Nam. You know that. Call me back." He ended the call, staring down at the phone like it had betrayed him. No answer came. The next morning, Maya's footage hit the internet. Within hours, it was shared by veterans groups, Asian American advocates, and civil rights lawyers. The hashtags #HonorMin and #ThisIsAmerica2 began trending. But with the momentum came backlash. A Department of Homeland Security spokesperson appeared on morning news, defending the ICE officers' conduct. "There are protocols. Sometimes people don't understand the full legal context." And then, ominously, she added, "Just because someone helped in a past conflict doesn't automatically entitle them to permanent residence. We respect their contribution, but laws must be followed." Maya looked at Ray when she saw the clip. "She's talking about him like he's an expired coupon," she said. Ray nodded grimly. "Then it's time we remind them what loyalty really means." He picked up the folder again, now filled with not just stories, but names, videos, photographs, signed letters from men in their 60s and 70s who owed Min their lives. If the system wouldn't speak for Min, then Ray would. Louder, and in a way no court could ignore. Maya stared at the computer screen long after the video had finished uploading. Her apartment was quiet, lit only by the blue glow from her monitor and the flicker of headlines updating in real time. Something about all this didn't add up. She leaned back and exhaled, thinking about everything Ray had said, the fire in his voice, the way he looked at Min like the man had once held the world together with nothing but gauze and grit. She opened a new browser window and began digging. First, she looked into Min Tran's immigration file, public databases, archived court cases. The basics were there: arrived in the US in 1980, applied for permanent residency, fell into bureaucratic limbo during a policy freeze in the mid-80s. After that, just a long silence. Too long. Then she cross-referenced veterans who had filed affidavits in support of Min. Most were easily verifiable: combat medics, radio operators, gunners. But when she tried to trace Ray's military record, she hit a wall. His official file was unusually thin, too thin, almost scrubbed. One line stood out: assigned to Operation Night Dust. Classification restricted, access code 33 billions. She'd never seen that designation before. Maya picked up her phone and called her source, an ex-NSA analyst who now taught cybersecurity at a state college and owed her a favor. 33 billions, the man said. That's deep black, not just eyes only. It's buried, like congressional hearing wiped kind of buried. Would they ever assign civilians, foreign nationals, to something like that, she asked. If they had skills the military needed and plausible deniability, yes. Interpreters, scouts, medics who weren't on paper. So Min could have been involved? He was quiet a moment. If his name isn't in any file, that might be your answer. Maya's heart raced. She hung up, opened a secure database she wasn't technically allowed to access, and searched Operation Night Dust again. There were no direct hits, but there was a scan of a declassified logistics request buried in a congressional archive. Field extraction personnel, Tran M, unconfirmed, to be escorted by Sergeant Carter R. It was dated 1972, so it was true. Min had been extracted, saved, protected. She stared at the screen, stunned, and then a second wave hit her. The judge, Halvorsen, she typed in his name. Old articles surfaced: congressional bid, military service, Bronze Star. She scrolled further, found an op-ed written by him 5 years ago during a campaign. We cannot continue extending legal forgiveness to those whose presence weakens the fabric of lawful society. Our veterans deserve more than lip service. They deserve to live in a nation not diluted by broken systems and unchecked borders. Maya's stomach turned. This wasn't just legalism, this was ideology. And then she saw it. An older photo buried in a scanned veterans newsletter. A reunion in 1984. A group of men in uniform, one of them unmistakably a younger Ray Carter, standing 2 bodies over. A man labeled Lieutenant Philip Halvorsen. Same unit, same war, same fire base, and if Ray had been saved by Min, so had Halvorsen. Ray opened the door before Maya could even knock. His expression was unreadable, but the look in his eyes, calm and heavy, told her he already knew why she'd come. I found it, she said, holding up a tablet. You and Halvorsen, Firebase 1972. He was there. Min saved both of you, didn't he? Ray stepped aside without a word and let her in. His living room was small but meticulously clean. On the mantel sat a folded flag, a few commendations in frames, and a black and white photo of a much younger Min, shirtless and grinning, sitting atop an ammo crate next to a helicopter. Ray sat down slowly. I figured you'd find it eventually. Maya didn't sit. You knew he was lying in court. Ray nodded. I knew he'd buried it, just didn't know how deep. She lowered the tablet. Why didn't you say it outright? He looked up. Because I gave my word, and back then that meant something. Maya waited. Ray ran a hand over his face and leaned forward. Min was recruited by Special Activities, not officially CIA, but they trained him. He didn't just patch us up, he got us out. More than once. One OP went bad, ambush, intel leak. We were surrounded. Min was the only one not hit. He dragged me out first. Then Halvorsen. He paused, but Halvorsen froze, wouldn't cover the retreat. Min had to go back for him while I laid cover fire. Min got him out, and Halvorsen never thanked him, never even looked at him again. Why? Because that day Halvorsen had pissed his pants, Ray said flatly, and Min saw it. He carried him, literally, out of the fire like a child, and Halvorsen couldn't live with it. Maya's breath caught. Ray continued, voice low. When we got back to the base, Halvorsen filed a report that scrubbed Min's name. Said I made the saves. He took the credit, got his bronze star, got promoted, built his career on a lie. Maya sat down now, gently, and now he's using that power to erase Min. Ray nodded, full circle. She stared at him. Why haven't you gone public? He looked down. Because I never got proof, and the men who knew, most are dead, or don't want to relive it. She held up the tablet again. But I found enough, and I think there's more. Declassified budget records, personnel logs. I'll find the rest. Ray looked at her, long and hard. You do that? For Min? Yeah. For the truth? Always. Ray stood up. Then it's time. For what? He walked over to the fireplace, reached behind a dusty stack of papers, and pulled out an old VHS tape. This was mailed to me in '89. No return address, just said keep this safe. I didn't have a player for years. Then I watched it, and I knew I couldn't unsee it. He handed her the tape. Maya stared at it. What's on it? He met her eyes, a helmet cam from a dead sergeant. The whole up, Min saving us. Halverson crying. Everything. Maya's heart slammed in her chest. Can I digitize this? Ray nodded. It's time the truth had a voice. She rose to her feet. And when the judge sees it, Ray's mouth curled into something between a smile and a warning. He won't be the judge anymore. The tape hissed as it spun in the deck of the old VHS player. The footage flickered, grainy and raw. For several seconds there was only static, then the feed stabilized. A jungle, screams, the thunder of gunfire. Maya leaned forward in her chair, breath held. Beside her, Ray sat rigid, eyes locked on the screen. The camera swiveled wildly. Whoever had worn it was sprinting through thick brush. Through the chaos, a wounded soldier dragged himself behind a log. Another voice yelled, "He's gone! Leave him!" Then Min appeared in the frame, slender, mud-caked, calm. He didn't speak. He just hoisted the wounded man, Ray, and half carried, half dragged him out of frame. The camera followed. Next, a panicked Halvorsen stumbled into view, firing blindly, screaming for help. Min ran back. The lens caught the exact moment Min tackled him to the ground, shielding him from an explosion. Then Halvorsen started sobbing, curled up like a child. Min pulled him to his feet, slapped his helmet back on and screamed, "Move!" The footage cut to static, then ended. Silence. Maya looked at Ray. This is everything." He nodded slowly. "And now it's yours." She wasted no time. That same night, she digitized the video, uploaded it to her secure drive, and scheduled it for release through multiple independent outlets. YouTube, encrypted forums, even military archive channels. The upload timer ticked down, 13 hours until publish. She stared at the countdown as if it were a fuse. The next morning, Ray received a call, not from a lawyer, not from the press, but from a man whose voice he hadn't heard in 3 decades. Raymond Carter. "Ben?" Ray asked, startled. "Colonel Strickland, DOD liaison," his old commanding officer. "We need to talk," Strickland said, voice clipped. "Now." They met in a parking lot near the VA hospital, where no cameras rolled and no microphones lingered. Strickland looked tired, older, but still carried himself like a soldier. "You're putting a lot at risk," he said. Ray didn't flinch. "For Min, I'd do more. The tape is real. You tell me. You saw him in Nam same as I did." Strickland looked away. "There are pressures, elections, optics. The judge is connected." Ray's eyes narrowed. "You're protecting a liar. I'm protecting stability. You're protecting a coward." Silence. Then Strickland leaned in. "They'll come after you, not just discredit you, they'll destroy you. Halvorsen has friends in high places." Ray smiled grimly. "Then tell them to aim straight." He turned and walked away. That night, as Maya returned to her apartment, she sensed something was off. The front door wasn't locked. The knob bore scratches. Inside, her laptop sat open, but the screen was black. She rushed to it, heart pounding, and tried to access the hard drive. Corrupted. The upload file was gone. The scheduled release timer cancelled. All backup drives were missing. She felt dizzy. Then her phone buzzed with a private number. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Rivera," a voice said, electronically distorted. "Take a step back or you'll lose more than footage." She hung up without responding. The next morning she filed a police report, and the officers shrugged. No signs of forced entry, no stolen valuables. Might be technical error. Maya knew better. This wasn't a warning. It was the first strike. She grabbed her bag and drove straight to Ray's cabin, adrenaline pounding in her chest. As she pulled into his gravel driveway, he opened the door. He didn't even look surprised. "They got to the tape," she said breathlessly. "Everything's gone." Ray held up a small object between his fingers, a microSD card. "Not everything." She stared at him. "I knew they'd come," he said, "so I made a backup of the backup. I don't trust clouds, I trust dirt." He pulled open a drawer, revealing a metal box half filled with old dog tags, a Medal of Honor, and beneath it, another SD card. 2 copies, one stays buried, one goes viral. She took it, gripping it like it was holy. "Upload it from somewhere safe," he said. "This time, let it fly." Maya didn't return to her apartment. Instead, she drove 2 hours north to a small library in a farming town where nobody knew her name. She bought a burner laptop at a gas station on the way and paid in cash. Inside the library's dusty computer lab, she plugged in the microSD card. It mounted instantly. The video file was there, intact. Her fingers trembled as she clicked through her upload network, bypassing corporate platforms, routing through encrypted nodes and military forums run by whistleblowers and rogue veterans collectives. This wasn't just journalism now, this was war. The upload began. She wrote no headlines, no commentary. Just the title, Firebase 9, The Day a Ghost Saved 2 Men, and a subtitle, Footage from Operation Night. Dust, 1972, when it hit 100%. She powered everything off, smashed the burner laptop in the parking lot dumpster, and drove away. By the time she got back to the city, her phone was blowing up. Bloggers, military archivists, a retired general, even a congressional staffer, they had seen it. And it was spreading. Halverson was already at the courthouse when the clip was aired on national morning news. He watched in horror from the conference room TV as his own terrified younger self appeared on screen, crying as Mintran shielded him from a mortar blast. The footage looped. So did the headlines, "Hero deported by the coward he saved." By 11 a.m., protesters were gathering on the courthouse steps. Vietnamese flags, uranium.sulfur. Flags, homemade signs with phrases like "Honor has no borders" and "Min saved America." Halvorsen slammed his fist on the table. "Shut it down!" But even his advisors looked pale. "There's no legal mechanism to suppress the footage," one said. "It's authentic. The metadata matches. There's already over 3 million views. Then arrest the damn reporter." "We can't. There's no grounds." Halverson turned to the U.S. Marshal stationed near the door. "Escort Sergeant Carter into custody. Witness tampering. Obstruction." The Marshal hesitated. "Sir, we need a warrant. I am the law in this room." But he wasn't, not anymore. That same hour, Ray was preparing to head into court for Min's final appeal when he received a call from Colonel Strickland. "I watched it," the colonel said. "Then you know what Min did. I always knew." Ray said nothing. Strickland cleared his throat. "We've contacted the Department of Homeland Security. They're reviewing Min's file under emergency humanitarian relief." "And Halverson?" A pause. "He's being referred to the Judicial Ethics Committee." Ray chuckled. Guess honor finally spoke louder than silence. Inside the courtroom, the energy had shifted. This wasn't just a hearing anymore, it was history catching up. The judge's bench was empty. Halverson hadn't shown up. Instead, a substitute federal judge entered quietly, took his seat, and called the case to order. Ray sat beside Min at the defendant's table. Maya was behind them, press badge hanging visibly. The new judge looked at the paperwork briefly, then at Ray. "I've reviewed the footage. I've seen the supplemental affidavits, and I've spoken with military legal counsel." He turned to Min. "Mr. Tran, you are hereby granted full permanent residency status under Section 212 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. On behalf of this court," he paused, "and on behalf of the United States government, we thank you for your service." Min didn't speak, he just nodded once, eyes glistening. The courtroom erupted. Applause. Cheers, veterans saluting. Ray remained still, staring ahead, jaw clenched, not in anger now, but in release. It was over. Min was going home, and for once, the country he had risked everything for had stood up for him. Ray had never intended to become a symbol. He had come to testify, to stand by a friend, to honor a promise made in a muddy jungle decades ago. But now, with a single piece of footage, the entire country was watching. 3 days after Min's deportation order was overturned, Ray was invited to appear on a primetime special. He refused. "This isn't about me," he said, but the story wouldn't fade. Cameras camped outside the courthouse. News anchors debated military ethics. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag honor is real. Hashtag Min Savior Team. Hashtag Judge Halvorsen resign. Then came the subpoenas. Halvorsen, still officially on leave, was called to a judicial ethics hearing. But instead of retreating, he doubled down. His legal team released a statement claiming the footage was taken out of context, accusing Maya of manipulating veterans for personal fame. It backfired. Maya didn't respond publicly. She didn't need to. The footage stood on its own. Ray, however, had had enough. So when a local veterans group invited him to speak at a community town hall held in a repurposed church basement that could barely seat 200, he agreed. That night, over 600 people showed up. Folding chairs lined the parking lot. Volunteers streamed the speech online. Cameras flashed. Microphones hummed. Ray stood at the front, not behind a podium, but simply on the floor, a microphone in one hand, the other resting at his side like it always had before battle. He wore his Marine Corps jacket, threadbare at the elbows, and spoke without notes. "I served with a man named Min Tran," he began. "Some of you know what he did, most of you don't." He described the jungle, the heat, the chaos, the silence after the fighting. He spoke of Min pulling broken men out of craters, carrying stretchers too heavy for one body to lift, never asking for recognition, just asking to stay. He didn't come here for money or status. He came because he believed the promise we gave him, that if he stood with us, we'd stand with him. Ray's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But one man decided that promise didn't matter. One man, so ashamed of the help he received, he spent 50 years pretending it never happened. He used power to erase the people who saved his life. Ray paused. The room was silent. "That man is Judge Halvorsen," gasps. Phones recording. A woman near the back covered her mouth. Ray met the eyes of the cameras now. "I'm not here to ruin a man. I'm here to remind this country of its word. Min Tran saved me, saved Halvorsen, and this nation turned its back on him for half a century." He stepped forward. "If honor means anything, it means standing up when it's hardest. Not when you're strong, but when you're scared. I'm scared right now. I don't know what this will cost me, but I will not let a coward write the ending to a hero's story." Applause started low, then surged like a wave. Maya, standing just outside the main door, wiped her eyes. Ray handed the microphone to a young veteran beside him and walked out into the night. No press escort, no speeches, just the stars above and the memory of a man who once carried him out of hellfire and into life again. The next morning, Halvorsen walked into his ethics hearing, pale and stone-faced. Across the street, hundreds of people had gathered, not to shout, not to riot, just a stand. Some held photos of loved ones who'd served. Some wore fatigues. Some, like Ray, wore nothing but an old patch on their chest, one that still meant something. Inside the hearing room, Halverson took the oath. But this time, the silence wasn't for him, it was for Min. The hearing room was colder than Ray expected. Not from the air conditioning, but from the energy in the space, the kind of sterile institutional chill that made you forget what sunlight felt like. He sat quietly behind the rows of officials, Maya beside him, notepad in hand. Across the aisle sat Halverson, no longer in robes, now in a charcoal suit 2 sizes too large for the dignity he tried to wear. His hands were clasped, white-knuckled. His lawyers flanked him like crumbling pillars, their faces pinched from damage control fatigue. At the head of the room was the ethics panel, 5 members, 3 judges, 2 civilian appointees. Neutral on paper, but none of them could ignore what the world had seen on tape. The lead judge, a tall woman with iron-grey hair named Justice Avery, leaned forward. "Judge Halverson, we will begin with your sworn statement." Halverson cleared his throat. "I acted within the bounds of my authority based on the information available at the time." Justice Avery interrupted. "Understood. But before we continue, we've received supplemental evidence." "Miss Rivera?" Maya stood. She approached the panel and plugged a flash drive into the main display. A single file opened. Not the battlefield footage, it had already been entered into record, but something else entirely, a deposition transcript. 3 weeks ago, Maya said, I interviewed Sergeant Colin Hayes, U.S. Army, retired. Served as Halverson's platoon radioman in Vietnam. He reached out to me after seeing the footage. Justice Avery nodded. Proceed. Maya hit play on the audio file. Hayes' voice crackled over the speakers. "Yeah, I remember Min. We all did. He wasn't just a translator, he saved lives. Halverson?" Man froze under fire. Min pulled him out of a ravine while he cried for his mom. Whole squad saw it. Ray watched Halverson flinch. Another clip followed. We joked that Min had more guts than our officers, and that included Halverson. He hated that. I think he spent the rest of his life trying to pretend it never happened. Then silence. Justice Avery looked at Halverson. "Do you dispute the authenticity of this statement?" Halverson's voice was flat. I don't recall that incident." Avery didn't blink. "Do you deny that Min Tran pulled you from a hostile zone during Operation Night Dust?" Halverson stared at the table. "No." The room shifted, not with movement, but with meaning. Then Avery said, "Mr. Carter, would you care to make a sworn statement?" Ray stood. He walked to the center with the quiet steadiness of a man who had nothing left to prove. The bailiff held out the Bible. Ray looked at it, nodded once, and placed his hand on the cover. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Justice Avery gestured. "You may begin." Ray spoke plainly. "In 1972, I was wounded during a recon mission near Firebase 9. Min Tran carried me 2 miles under fire to safety. He also pulled Judge Halverson out of a crater. Min didn't have to save him. He did it because it was right." He turned, facing Halverson. "You were unconscious, you don't remember. But I do." Halverson's eyes darted. "This is character assassination." "No," Ray said. "This is testimony." The panel said nothing. They didn't have to. Maya stepped forward again. "I have one more document," she said. "A letter, dated 1973, from Halverson's own hand. A recommendation for Min Tran's Medal of Honor. Never submitted, never mailed." "Why didn't you file this, Judge?" Maya asked. Halverson didn't respond. Justice Avery looked down at the letter. "We'll recess for deliberation," gavel struck. The room emptied slowly, but Ray remained. Halverson stood across from him, glaring. "You think you've won?" The judge spat. Ray didn't smile. "No, I think Min did." And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving Halverson to sit in silence, this time not from power, but from truth. When the ethics panel returned, the room quieted so quickly it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Justice Avery's face was unreadable as she adjusted her glasses and looked down at the ruling. After reviewing all testimonies, video evidence and supplemental records, the panel has reached a unanimous conclusion. She paused. Even the cameras outside seemed to freeze. Judge Halverson is hereby found to have committed multiple ethical violations, including abuse of judicial discretion, willful concealment of material evidence, and conduct unbecoming of the bench. There was no gavel, no dramatic bang. Just 5 quiet words: "You are hereby suspended indefinitely." Halverson didn't move. The room didn't cheer. "Not yet," Justice Avery continued. "Furthermore, the panel recommends that the Department of Justice investigate potential obstruction of justice related to Mr. Tran's immigration proceedings." That broke the tension. Gasps, shifting chairs, a sharp intake of breath from Halverson's own legal counsel. Ray exhaled slowly. Maya's pen stopped mid-word. She didn't need to take notes anymore. The truth had landed. But it wasn't over. Outside the courthouse, a sea of people waited. Word had already spread. Live streams, tweets, headlines. As Ray and Maya stepped through the double doors, applause erupted. Not the celebratory kind, but the kind that carried weight. It was slow, purposeful, one beat at a time. The sound of people saying, "We heard you, we believe you." Ray raised a hand in acknowledgement. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't triumphant, he was exhausted. Then the doors opened behind him. Halverson stepped out. For the first time, no camera turned to him. He tried to push through the crowd, but something stopped him. An elderly Vietnamese man, maybe 75, stepped into his path. He didn't yell, he didn't shove. He simply stared at Halverson and said, "We remember." Halverson's lips curled, as if to respond, but then he saw something beyond the man's shoulder, an entire row of veterans, standing at attention. Navy, Army, Marines. Some in full uniform, others in battered jackets. They weren't blocking his way. But they weren't moving either. It wasn't a protest. It was a silent wall of memory. And Halverson finally turned, not toward the cameras, but toward the back of the building, toward the shadows. That night, Maya aired a final segment. It wasn't a takedown piece. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet monologue over footage of Min and Ray walking side by side down a tree-lined street. "We tell stories to remember," Maya said, "and sometimes remembering is the most dangerous thing you can do, but it's also the most necessary." Cut to the folded letter Halverson never sent. Cut to the moment Min lifted Halverson's bleeding body from the jungle floor. We are a country of stories, and today the right one finally won. At Ray's apartment, Min was sitting on the porch, holding a mug of tea. "I don't know what to do next," he admitted. Ray sat beside him. "You don't have to know. You just have to keep showing up." Min chuckled. "You sound like my old drill sergeant. I probably stole it from him." They sat there for a long time. No medals, no speeches, just 2 men finally allowed to be quiet together. The city held its breath the next morning. It wasn't just about Halverson anymore. The story had grown into something larger. A reckoning not just with one man's failure, but with a nation's long-forgotten promises. The mayor's office, under pressure from multiple communities and national media, organized a press conference in front of the Veterans Memorial Plaza. It was meant to be symbolic, healing, unifying. But no one knew who would speak. That morning, Ray didn't intend to go. "I'm not a politician," he told Maya. "You're not," she agreed. "That's why they'll listen." Min was there too, dressed in a simple button-down, the scar on his temple now fully visible in the sunlight. He looked over at Ray and nodded. "I think it's time." Hundreds gathered in front of the marble wall etched with names. Cameras rolled. News anchors whispered into microphones. The mayor spoke first, offering words of gratitude, apology, and acknowledgement, but it was clear the crowd wasn't there for her. Then Maya stepped up, speaking not as a journalist, but as a citizen. What happened to Minh Tran should never have happened. Not just because he served, not just because he saved lives, but because his story is the story of America, complicated, courageous, and too often ignored. She looked to Ray. Today we correct that. She stepped back. Ray walked forward, slowly. His cane tapped against the stone platform. When he reached the podium, he didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket pocket. It was the letter. Halverson's unsigned Medal of Honor recommendation. Ray held it up. This letter was written 50 years ago, he said. It never made it where it needed to go, but it exists. And now so does the truth. He turned slightly to face Min, who stood just behind him. I can't give you the medal, but I can give you the story. And maybe that's what matters more. The crowd was silent. Then, one by one, the veterans in the front row began to salute. Min's eyes welled up. He returned the salute with a trembling hand. Then something unexpected happened. A woman in uniform stepped up from the crowd, a Pentagon representative. She introduced herself as Captain Julia Adams and addressed Min directly. I'm here on behalf of the Secretary of Defense, and while the Medal of Honor process cannot be expedited, I have been instructed to present you with the Department of Defense's Distinguished Civilian Service Award, the highest honor for a non-citizen combatant. She stepped forward and pinned a ribbon to Min's chest. The moment froze in time. Flashbulbs, cheers, and silence all at once. Later that evening, Maya aired her final report on the case. The segment wasn't flashy, it was raw. Snippets of interviews, courtroom audio, and moments between Ray and Min that had never been shown before. She ended the broadcast with one line, "Some wars end on the battlefield. Others end when the truth is finally allowed to speak." A week later, a small plaque was added to the Veterans Memorial. It didn't mention Halverson. It didn't need to. It simply read, "For those who served with honor, even when the country forgot." And beneath it, Minh Tran, patriot, brother, hero. Ray visited it every Sunday, not to mourn, but to remember, because stories like this, once forgotten, had finally been told the way they deserved. The plaza was nearly empty the following Sunday morning. Just a few passers-by, a pair of pigeons, and the low rustle of wind moving through trees that had once stood silent during protests. Ray arrived early. No cameras this time, no podium, just a small bouquet of white lilies tucked under his arm and a paper cup of gas station coffee in his hand. He didn't walk straight to the memorial. Instead, he circled the path like he always did. 3 full laps. It was a ritual he'd picked up years ago. Something about walking before remembering made the memories settle easier in his bones. On the 4th lap, he stopped. The plaque looked the same, but it felt different now. Permanent, undeniable. Ray crouched, slowly, painfully, and placed the flowers beneath Min's name. He sat on the nearby bench and stared. His thoughts didn't race, they wandered. He remembered the jungle, the gunfire, the way Min pulled him through mud and bullets without so much as a complaint. He remembered the years in silence, the guilt of surviving. He remembered Halverson's face when the truth landed. Not broken, just hollow. And he remembered the moment Min looked at him after the ceremony and said, "Now I can finally sleep." It wasn't vindication Ray felt, it was release, a quiet lifting of something that had lived in his chest for too long. He stayed until the sun was high enough to cast long shadows over the wall. Then he stood, adjusted his coat, and turned to go. That's when he saw Maya. She hadn't said anything, just stood there, camera slung around her shoulder, eyes soft. "You always do this alone?" she asked. Ray nodded. "Not always. Sometimes Min joins, but today he's with his granddaughter, teaching her how to fish." Maya smiled. "That sounds about right." They stood in silence for a moment longer. Then she pulled out a folded piece of paper. "It's done," she said. "The publisher approved it. Full print, Sunday feature." Ray raised an eyebrow. "You mean," she nodded, "the quiet oath. Front page of the national section. Your photo. His name. No edits." Ray exhaled. "You did good." Maya looked down at the plaque. "No, you did good." Then, before he could respond, she handed him the folded newspaper proof. "This story, it's not just about Min or Halverson. It's about what it means to show up, even when no one's watching." Ray tucked it into his coat. "People won't forget this one," she added. Ray gave a small smile. "Let's hope they don't have to be reminded again." They walked away slowly, side by side. No longer reporter and subject, but something quieter. Something like family. A week after the story went to print, the responses began pouring in. Thousands of letters, emails, calls. Veterans who had never spoken about their experiences wrote to say, "This was my friend." Children of refugees wrote, "This is my father's story." A congressman introduced legislation called the Forgotten Heroes Act, proposing new standards for recognizing Allied foreign veterans. Ray didn't read all the messages, but he kept a box of them. Min, now a permanent resident with full protections, had gone fishing again, this time farther north near Big Bear Lake. He didn't answer many calls. He didn't have to. One photo emerged on social media. It showed Min standing at the edge of a dock with his granddaughter beside him. He was holding a small trout, grinning like a man who had finally remembered how to be free. Maya's story was nominated for a national award. She declined the ceremony. Instead, she hosted a small event at the community center where Ray had once given his town hall speech. She called it the Quiet Room, a gathering of veterans, immigrants, and families who had lived in the shadows for too long. At the center of the room, framed on a modest wooden easel, stood the now famous photograph of Min and Ray in front of the plaque. Beneath it, a single quote, "We didn't need medals, we needed each other." As people passed by, they didn't linger because of fame. They stayed because something about the story reminded them of something they'd almost forgotten, that dignity doesn't need a spotlight, it just needs a witness. Ray stopped attending the press interviews. He said what he needed to say. But every Sunday, he still walked the plaza. Same path, same flowers, same quiet nod to the wall. One morning he found something different, a small paper crane, folded perfectly. Balanced on the edge of the bench. No note, just a symbol. Hope. Someone had remembered. He picked it up, held it for a moment, then tucked it inside his coat pocket. As he walked away, the camera, Maya's camera, watched him from a quiet distance. There would be no narration this time, no music, just the soft sound of wind in the trees, the steady rhythm of Ray's steps, and the quiet echo of memory doing what it was always meant to do. Stay! And just before the screen faded to black, one line appeared in silence. "This story is for everyone who stood quietly until it mattered most. Some men never ask for thanks. Some fights never make headlines. But when a veteran stands up, not for glory, but for a promise made decades ago, the world should stop and listen." If this story moved you or reminded you of someone you love, drop a comment below. We want to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in that courtroom? And if you believe duty and honor still matter, please hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who might need a quiet reminder that justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears a uniform. This is Veteran Biker, where true courage doesn't fade. It echoes. Watch more untold stories right here on the screen. We'll see you in the next one. Tomorrow's story will be even harder to forget.